Welcome to Leading from the Middle. I'm Dave Hoffman, and I'm a distinguished professor of organizational behavior here at the Keenan-Flagler Business School at the University of North Carolina. The focus of my research and teaching over the last 20 some odd years has really been leadership, particularly focused on middle management. Thinking about organizational context, organizational design, cultures, organizational culture, and leadership. I've done a lot of executive education and work with executives around these topics. I've done consulting work with organizations, and I've also held several administrative positions within the business school that put me right in the middle.
And I'm also Dave. I'm Dave Roberts. I'm an assistant professor here at Keenan-Flagler. I'm in the marketing faculty. I teach on our full-time programs and also, like Dave, teach in our executive education suite. But I'm a little bit more recent to academia than Dave is, having spent the vast majority of my time in business, mostly as a middle or senior manager or a consultant, and then more recently here at the school teaching and in my specialist areas, which are influence and persuasion.
So, leading from the middle. Why leading from the middle? Well, if you think about management books and leadership books that you see at the airport when you're on your way on a business trip, we can sort of segment those into one of two different types of books. One book is focused on the CEO who's now written a book, and it's, they have a deep voice, and it's the CEO, and now I'm going to tell you how to be a CEO. And they talk about running a global organization and the things they learned and so forth, and that's great. And then the other type of book is one that's really focused on very individual sort of introspective leadership in terms of value-based leadership or principle-based leadership or very sort of dyadic relationships in terms of negotiation. And both of those types of books have great value and they have great content. But we think they both ignore one key part. That the big macro books you actually have to run that global organization using a lot of folks in the middle who have to translate strategy into action and into performance. And the other half of the books sort of ignore that you actually have to engage your principle value-based leadership in a much broader organizational context that has power and politics and incentives and misaligned incentives and so forth. And so we decided to blend my academic and consulting and executive education background with Dave's business and practitioner background and more recently academic background to do a little something different.
And the other thing that we did different is really to focus on the gap. Dave's talked about the extremes, and there are solutions available in those extremes, but there is this chasm in the middle, which really is what the majority of managers do, which is to lead or to attempt to lead from the middle. And so what we developed is a program to fit that gap very specifically. We've also taken contemporary thinking and research and developed a framework for what it means to be an effective middle manager. And that framework is three easy phases. The first part is to understand the environment, to understand the macro, to understand the context. The second then is to determine how to engage. So what leads to successful engagement from a middle manager's perspective? And then the third, and I guess this is really the function of a middle manager, is to then find the way of performing, in other words, to add value to the organization.
So I will be with you principally through the first half of the course, and we'll do a deep dive into understanding the organizational context. So we'll start Unit 1 with an experiential exercise where we'll throw you into a real organization and we'll sort of see how that works out for you. And then we'll do a deeper dive into sort of traditional organizational structures and the strengths and weaknesses of those and the assumptions and the predictable problems that they have. We'll spend a bit of time on matrix organizations, which most all of you are working in. And if you're not quite sure if you're working in a matrix organization, if you have two bosses that often don't get along, you're working in a matrix organization. We'll then talk a little bit about cross-functional decision-making, which is often a manifestation of matrix organizations. And then we'll move in the last unit that I'm principally with you, into the informal aspects of the organization, thinking about culture, power, and politics.
And then I'll take that piece another level. So we'll move into the engage phase. We'll look at politics and move it down to the middle manager, the implications for the middle manager. So how does the middle manager use I guess in some cases abuse, but how should a middle manager use politics in order to achieve what they need and enable them to be successful? And we'll spend a complete unit focused on some very, very critical skills. So these are skills that have been identified as essential to performance in terms of engaging, interacting, and specifically influencing aspects of your network and of your organization to achieve what you need to achieve as a middle manager.
And then after we've done organizational context and understanding that, how to effectively engage and influence, we'll circle back with starting to deliver value. So the unit next to last, our final unit, we'll engage in a computer-based simulation, which will enable you to sort of integrate and tie together what we've done so far, and to start practicing a little bit through the simulation how to line up the stakeholders to really drive value for the organization. And then in the last week, we'll do a little bit of a course wrap-up, but we'll also move you into a much more practical sort of application of this content specifically for you, which is how can we help you start the process of developing a guidebook or a template that you can use starting now and for hopefully years into the future. What are some specific actions that you could take to help quickly understand the organizational context to start engaging effectively with the people and the key stakeholders in that context to lay the foundation for delivering outstanding value for the organization?
So, leading from the middle, it's very simple. Understand, engage, provide value. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are too. Welcome.
Welcome.